I want to start this episode today with a quick experiment. If I asked you right now to name the two best dive watches in the world, what's the first answer that pops into your head? I'm going to bet it's some version of Submariner or Seamaster or both. Stick a pin in that. We're coming back to it. You've been had. We've all been had. And I'm going to show you how. Welcome back to What's on Your Restay. I'm Wachowski. If you're catching up, episode 3 was a heavy one. If you sat with me through that, thank you again, genuinely. I never take that for granted. Today we're picking up the energy. We're going to do two things in this episode. First, I'm going to walk you through a piece of decision psychology that I think every watch enthusiast needs to understand. It explains why so many of us end up wanting the same 5 watches and why it's not actually our fault, mostly. Second, I'm going to introduce you to 3 brands, in my opinion, that are operating completely outside of that system. Brands that are doing genuinely interesting work and aren't on most people's radar yet. Those brands are Yema, I-E-M-A. You'll hear the French say Yama. You'll learn about Horage, H-O-R-A-G-E, rhymes with garage. And then you're going to hear about H, Moser, and Cie. And Cie, it ends in C-I-E. That's just French for and company. So H, Moser, and company. H, like the letter H. Moser is M-O-S-E-R, and that's Cie. So H, Moser, and Cie. But first, let's talk about how you got tricked. So segment 1 is going to be the Decoy Effect. Okay. There's a famous experiment, if you haven't heard of it, it was done by behavioral economist Dan Ariely. He wrote in his book, and the book is fascinating if you have time, maybe when you're done with my podcast, go take a look and see if you can find Predictably Irrational. Again, Predictably Irrational. Ariely is A-R-I-E-L-Y. And it's based on real-world pricing examples from The Economist magazine. Now, so here's the setup. The Economist, again, you know The Economist, right? It's a finance magazine. They had subscriptions in 3 tiers. They had tier 1, right? Web only. So you just get the website. Get access to all of their articles digitally. $59. Then they had print only. So you only get a physical one in the mail. $125 for that, right? For that subscription. Or you could get the print and the web also for $125. Now, pause. Let's think about those 3 for a second. Anyone hearing or reading this sees this immediately. Option 2, the print only for $125, is an insane option. Why would you pay the same price for less when option 3 is there? Option 3 is obviously the one that's going to crush option 2. So Ariely, he tested this on 100 MIT students. With all 3 options on the table, 16% of the 100 students, makes it pretty easy, right? So 16 of them, selected and picked the cheapest web-only option, right? 0 of them, which is good because they're MIT students, 0 of them picked option 2. And then if you go the other side, 84 picked the print and web bundle. This is an expensive option, but it won by a landslide. Okay, so then, again, behavioral economists, they like to play with this stuff. They did this research study. Ariely removed the middle option. Again, the option that no one selected. And now there were just 2 options, just 2 choices. The web only for $59 and the print and web for $125. And so do you think the results would be similar, right? Nobody picked the middle option, so removing that shouldn't matter. But it completely flipped what occurred. So now, after they removed this erroneous option in the middle, 68% picked the cheapest option, and only 32% picked the bundle, the most expensive. So what ended up happening was this useless middle option wasn't useless at all. The useless middle option was entirely the point. It was the decoy. It was placed there specifically to make the bundle look like a deal. And guess what? It worked. People who would have happily picked the cheapest option ended up spending double because of an option they didn't even consider. And this is what we call the decoy effect. A fancier name is asymmetric dominance. And it's everywhere. It's in coffee sizes, it's in movie theater popcorn, it's in the streaming tier services that you get, it's on the car lot, a lot, and it's in watch boutiques. And the takeaway from this is wild. Now, again, we think we're making rational choices based on what we want. We're actually making relative comparisons based on whatever options happen to be in front of us. Now, if we change the options, we change the choice without you or me ever noticing. Now, why in the world am I telling you this on a watch podcast? Let's get into segment 2. How you got tricked into wanting a Submariner. Now, this is my spicy take, okay? Submariner is an awesome watch. I don't want to take anything away from it. It's a wonderful watch. The entire mainstream luxury market is structurally doing this to you. Think about it. When you started getting into watches, when you first fell down the rabbit hole on YouTube, when you started watching reviews, when you walk into your first authorized dealer, what gets pushed in front of you? Submariner, a Seamaster, maybe a Datejust or an Aquaterra, a Daytona or Speedmaster, GMT Master, Black Bay GMT, maybe a different higher end, maybe something like Royal Oak or an Nautilus, right? Two options being compared. Always two. From the same handful of brands, reviewed by the same handful of YouTubers, discussed in the same forums, posted in the same Instagram feeds. You think you're choosing. I thought I was choosing. We thought we were choosing. But we've been fed a curated menu. The choices, they were made before we got there. We're just picking from what was already on the table. We're not going to restaurants, folks, and picking things that are typically not on the menu, right? So we are given what our options are. So here's the kicker. Once you've made your pick, you become an advocate for that. You defend your choice. We watch YouTube videos typically after we've made a purchase to validate ourselves. We join Facebook groups to discuss this watch. And it can be where some folks will have their identity wrapped around a watch. You might become the Submariner guy or the Seamaster guy, right? Or a different brand. You fill it in. And in the meantime, completely outside of this conversation, there are hundreds of incredible watch brands that you've never been told even exist. That's the trick. The trick isn't that the Submariner is bad. The Submariner is fantastic. I'm not knocking it. The trick is that you were never given the chance to discover whether something else might have been more yours. And that's the part that's frustrating to me. We are told, Brando wore this watch or, James Bond wore this watch. And then we associate these identities to them. But the question is, that's not your identity, right? My identity might be more affiliated with that Laurier Falcon that's connected to my daughter now, right? And that's a story that's my story. That's going to be the story that gets passed down to my daughter, right? My youngest. That's a completely different story that's not going to make it onto mainstream media. It's not going to do any of that kind of stuff. There's not going to be some film made about that watch, right? But it's connected to me. And my argument is going to be, as we build this up, your watches, the ones that you have identified with, the watch that you're holding your child with in a picture, they're going to look back and they're going to see that watch. Now, do you want that to be someone else's watch that was someone else's memories, or do you want it to be your watch with your memories? Okay, let's get into segment 3. Let's talk about the soccer field. I'm going to give you a metaphor that I think about this all the time. And I think about this specifically in this hobby. Again, we talked about, my family having connections to professional sports. Picture youth soccer. Specifically, picture like 5-year-olds playing soccer. If you've ever seen this or if you've ever coached it, you know what happens, and just Godspeed to you. You are more patient than I am. We have a running joke in our family that we never pray for patience, because if we pray for patience, God gives us opportunity to practice our patience. So picture this soccer field. You've got the ball in the middle of the field. There are 40 little legs in a giant cluster around it. And they're trying to find this ball. They're all trying to kick the ball, and the ball pops out. And then the entire cluster moves to where the ball is now. Then the ball pops out again, and the cluster moves again. And repeat this for, upwards of like an hour. That's the watch market. The ball is wherever the hype flashlight is pointing. And right now, that's a steel sports watch from one of the, big 3 brands, right? The cluster is everyone. The collectors, the YouTubers, the Instagrammers, the secondary market, the boutiques. They're all chasing the exact same thing at the exact same moment. They are literally those 5-year-olds around the soccer ball, moving all around, right? But here's the thing that's interesting about good soccer players. The good ones, really the great ones, they don't run to where the ball is. They run to where the ball is going to be. They read the play, and they're a step, 2, 3 steps ahead. They're already in the space, or they're going to be in the space, while everyone else is still chasing. And that's what good collecting, to me, looks like. Right now, where's the ball going? It's not going to another Submariner reference. I think it's going to independent watchmaking. It's going to small ateliers, right? Which is just a fancy word for a workshop. And they're doing extraordinary work. It's going to brands like Chopek. It's going to Torsti and Lina. It's going to Dornbluth. It's going to Fears. It's going to Beauvais. It's going to Parmigiani. The brands that we covered in the last couple of episodes, and a bunch of others that I haven't even mentioned yet. And so, yeah, the hype cycle, it might catch up. Sometimes it does. But by the time the cluster gets there, the people who already knew had their pick. They got there first, not because they're smarter, because they weren't chasing the ball. Let's get into segment 4. Let's figure out if you're a collector or a speculator. I don't want this to be a manifesto, so let's not go that direction, but it might. So just fair warning, right? Hopefully you have your snacks and your drinks. Now, I want to make a distinction that I think this whole conversation is going to pivot on this point. I think that there are really two kinds of people in this hobby. Now, again, gross generalizations always are horrible. Again, as somebody who has a terminal degree, I understand when we try to put things in boxes because it helps build dissertations and organize things. And we don't organize that cleanly. But again, I'm going to try this. I believe that there are collectors, true collectors, and there are speculators. A speculator buys a watch because they think it's going to appreciate, because their guy at the boutique said, this is a good investment, bro, because they read on Reddit that this specific reference is going to pop, and because they want to flip it in 2 years for a markup. Speculators are in the watch market, but they're not really in the watch hobby. They're going to move to the next thing. They might be selling, flipping and trading crypto, or they might be doing something else later on. They're not in this hobby to be in this hobby. They're in the hobby as a speculator. Now, a collector, on the other hand, they buy watches because they mean something to them, because the design spoke to them, because the movement is interesting, because it has a story, because they actually want to wear it, because every time they look down at their wrist, they feel something. And resale is not part of the calculation. If it appreciates, cool. If it doesn't, also great, because you still have a watch on your wrist or in your watch box or in your safe, or that you're going to pass down, that you love. Now, I want to be really careful here because this is going to sound harsher than I mean it. If you're only buying watches for appreciation, you are not a collector. You are a speculator, and probably this isn't the podcast for you. And that's not me being mean. That's just me being honest about what this show is really about. I would say culling the herd. There are great podcasts and YouTube channels for the speculative side of this hobby. They'll tell you what's hot. They'll tell you what's going to spike, what to flip, what allocation to chase. That's a real legitimate corner of this world, and there are people that are good at that. This is not, and I'm going to repeat that, this is not that show. This is a show for people who are, again, here we go, considered, who buy what is meaningful to them, who wear watches that have a story, who want their wrist to speak a conversation that goes deeper than the watch that is worth and whatever the next quarter is going to look like on Chrono 24. They don't care about appreciation or depreciation. What they care about is story. And so to me, what matters here is that we're buying watches that impress us, not our coworkers, not the dude at the gym, not in the comments section, us. I will wear a Panerai because I think that the one that I have is beautiful, because it's comfortable, because it tells a story. And here's why that matters. Because the watches that are meaningfully going to appreciate over the long term, we're measuring it in the wrong thing. We're always looking at finances, but we're not measuring them in emotions. The sense of becoming something more valuable to you is something that you can't sell. And they're almost never the same watches that the speculative market are chasing. The watch that you still love in 20 years is not the one that went up 30% last year. It's the one that you wore to your kid's birthday. It's the one your brother gave to you. It's the one you tracked down because of a story that meant something to you and nobody else. And that's the soul of this hobby. And it lives nowhere on a price chart. Okay, so that's the end of the sermon. I apologize. Let's talk about the 3 brands that I think exemplify what this is kind of looking like when you step out of that cluster. Let's go out of the herd, out of that, 5-year-old soccer game. Let's talk about segment 5. We'll talk about Yema. The French brand Yema, Yema, founded in 1948 by a dude named Henry Louis Belmont, Belmont, but I think it's pronounced Belmont, right? And the historical heart of French watchmaking is where this dude was founding this whole thing. And there's still a massive surge that's coming back in France in regard to independent watchmaking. So you're going to hear about Yema, you'll hear about other brands as well. Picquet is one that we'll probably cover in the future as well. Awesome. So here's one thing about Yema that almost no one knows. They have one of the deepest tool watch heritages in Europe. And we're talking like real history. They have a Superman dive watch that came out in 1963. It's earlier than most of the dive watches that you think of, like the classics. Their yachting graph was worn by sailors in the Whitbread round of the world race. They have watches that were worn by French astronauts when they flew on Soviet missions in the early 80s. They have pilot watches, dive watches, they have chronographs, they have GMTs, they've done it all. And they've done this with genuine military and professional contracts that are going to back this up for decades. So what happened? Where'd Yema go? Well, like most of them, the quartz crisis. It's a story you've heard a dozen times. Yema got beaten up, changed hands a few times, faded from the international conversation. But this is the part that kind of matters. They're back. And this is kind of the headline I want you to walk away with. For, under $2,500. And again, we know when we're talking about watches, we kind of know, right? You're getting into tutors that are $5, $6, $7 now. For under $2,500, you're going to get an in-house micro-rotor movement from Yema. 70 hours of power reserve. I'm going to read that again. An in-house micro-rotor under $2,500. So for context, for those who don't speak watch, a micro-rotor is just a small automatic winding rotor that sits inside the movement architecture as opposed to sitting on top. Typically, we see a rotor, it has the pivot kind of in the center, and then it rotates around the entire movement, and it makes the movement a little bit fatter. By having a micro-rotor, it's going to allow for a thinner and more elegant movement. You're also actually going to see more of the movement as well. So again, as you see more of the entire movement through the case back instead of giving this big rotor blocking the view, Patek Philippe, for example, makes micro-rotor movements. Piaget makes beautiful ones. Vacheron makes beautiful ones. And you're going to see some from the Voucher. We talked about Parmigiani, for example. Cheapest of those are going to start to what? $15,000, $20,000. And Yema's doing it for under $2,500. And the movement, again, to me, is gorgeous. It's decorated, it's robust, it's well built. The Yema calibers, the MBP 1000 family, they're produced in France. And they're not just like spec sheets. They look the part. They have a beautiful case back that you can see through and see the movement. And here's the cherry on top. You can option these scales bracelets on some of their watches. Now, they kind of look like they're beads of rice, but they're flattened out and they're cool. Like, they're genuinely cool. They have this kind of retro 70s kind of vibe to them. And most modern brands, they kind of cheap out on bracelets. I think Yema does it right, and they're stepping up the clasp and the adjustable clasp, and I think they're kind of moving in the right direction. And to me, the result is a watch that on wrist looks like nothing else in this price bracket. So Yema is the answer to the question, if you're going to ask this question, what does it look like when a real heritage brand decides to stop chasing the cluster and make excellent watches at fair prices? It looks like Yema. It's affordable, it's serious. Again, affordable in air quotes because $2,500 is not affordable in some circles, but in the watch space, it's really, you're kind of entry luxury, right? And it's not on Instagram all day, and you're going to be probably the only one at a watch meetup that's wearing one. So again, that's a feature and not a bug, especially of this podcast. Let's talk about Horage. Second brand, Horage, pronounced Horage, right? Kind of rhymes with garage or pour. Some people have pronounced it with like porridge, like Horage, right? I say Horage, Horage. Right, you're gonna see 2008 Andy, and I believe it's spelled Felsl, and I think it's pronounced Felsl. And I could be wrong, correct me. In Switzerland again, 2008, and this brand, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting things happening in modern watchmaking, and almost nobody's talking about it. And here's why. Again, most micro and boutique brands buy their movements from someone else. You're seeing a pattern, right? You see me talking about Yema and they have a split. In Yema, they're using some Solita stuff and then entry level and even some quartz stuff to really let people kind of open the door. For a couple $100, you can get into Yema. In regard to Horage, these micro and boutique brands, a lot of times they're buying their movements from someone else. Again, ETA, Solita, Miyota, Seiko's NH movements, for example. And again, they're great, but they're commodity components. You're paying for the brand and the design, not the engine inside. Horage decided from a very early point, right? They're going to make their own movements, actually make their own movements from scratch in-house. And they did it. Their K1 movement is an in-house automatic with 5-day power reserve, and that's longer than most anything in the mainstream market. They've made an in-house tourbillon They make their own silicon escapement components at a level of technical capability. I believe Horage is operating in a territory that brands that are 20 times their size would envy. And I like it because I think they do it with a little. But here's what I want to talk about with Horage, and this is what I think people are missing when they read through this spec sheet and then they just stop. These watches are unbelievably comfortable on wrist. Cases are thin, like stupid thin, genuinely. They've engineered around a micro-rotor movement specifically to keep the case height low. And the result is that even with their dive watches, they're, again, this more substantial kind of piece, they're not wearing like that. After a long day, most watches kind of feels like you're wearing something heavy. Horage just kind of disappears in the most beautiful way. And the micro-rotor movements, again, back to that micro-rotor concept that I mentioned with Yema, Horages are beautiful as well. Through the case back, you're going to see an entire movement laid out right in front of you, an elegant little off-center rotor, and all of this is decorated to a level that I think it kind of shows that, again, it's modern and it's a little bit. I don't want to be disrespectful to other brands because that's not my goal here, but they're doing something different. Their movements look different than what a prototypical movement would look like. And then their straps. There's two things to know. One, the rubber straps are, to me, some of the most comfortable rubber straps I've ever owned. Period. They put real R&D into the compound, the texture. They don't pull arm hair. They don't get sticky in the heat. They almost feel kind of like a fabricy silk. Again, FKM, think of like FKM, but just more comfortable, more silky. And the Horage rubber straps, for me, they kind of seek me out. I want to take that watch on a trip or vacation if there's water involved. Two, their bracelets. Horage offers bespoke bracelets with on-the-fly adjustments. That means that you can adjust, obviously, the clasp a few millimeters to a handful of millimeters without tools on your wrist. That's pretty standard now for some of these watches once you start to get over a couple $1,000. And you obviously know how nice that is. It's in the summer, your wrist swells up. If you're like me and you're arthritic, or you have a long flight or you have a workout or whatever, you bought this watch or you put it on and it fit perfectly in the morning and then all of a sudden it's tight, or it fits really tight in the morning and it's really loose by the afternoon. With Horage, push of a button and then your problem is solved. It's kind of the feature that these big Swiss brands have been talking about for years, and Horage just kind of did it. Now, Horage is not as polished brand-wise as the big Swiss names. Their aesthetics are more technical and sometimes they can be divisive. And I don't think that their marketing is as slick. Not to say that, they're not handing these watches to celebrities. They're a boutique manufacturer that's doing real engineering, and I think the watches reflect that, and they look like what they are. And some people, they resonate with them, and some people, they don't. To me, again, these watches resonate. Yema resonates with me. The kind of vintage feel from Yema, the more modern side of Horage, they resonate with me. For someone who actually cares about what's inside a watch and what's against your skin all day long, for someone who wants to wear a piece of contemporary horological engineering instead of like a status symbol, Horage is, to me, one of the best deals in the entire market, full stop. Now, one of the things that Parmigiani is kind of known for is kind of hiding hands, right? There's the GMT variant of Horage with the K2 movement. When you talk about that, the Super Seed, for example, that model, it's on a 12-hour. So that means that when you're not using your watch as a GMT, you can click your GMT hand or instead of it being on a 12-hour like it does on a GMT Master 2, where you see the GMT hand all the time. On a Horage, you can hide that hand underneath your regular hour hand, and now you just have a regular 3-hander watch with the date. Very cool. And it has a 12-hour, 24-hour indicator, so it'll tell you if you're in AM or PM. Again, pretty cool. And the watch is really thin. So if you've ever wanted to win a watch nerd argument, ask the other guy what Horage is making in-house this year, and they probably won't even know who Horage is, right? They'll ask you about porridge or something. Segment 3, let's get into H, Moser, and Cie. I would say that they're the most theatrical in the segment. I am going to have a little bit of fun with this. The third brand, H, Moser, and Cie. We spelled it already. This one, again, H. Moser, is the brand that makes me laugh probably the most in kind of like the best possible way. They're founded in 1828, and they were brought back into the modern era under the leadership of Edouard Meylan, Meylan. Again, super charming dude. He's, for me, one of the most charismatic and outspoken CEOs in this entire industry, and the watches that they put out are extraordinary. Fume dials, again, fume just means French for smoked, is a fade from the center color to a darker color, typically to the edge, and it's this kind of beautiful gradient way. And Moser does dials that they do them in a way that even though other folks are trying to copy them, when you see them in person, you kind of just get it. Pictures, even in the best, most perfect lighting, the second you get a watch on hand, if you're not seeing it actually dancing around, I mean, They just do something completely different. They're beautifully gradient in some instances, but they're also really strange because they have these minimalist designs at times. They often have no logo on their dials, and they have in-house movements with traditional finishing. And to me, they are the quietest loud brand in watchmaking. They have some of the best hot horology in the world. But what to me makes Moser is that they refuse to take this industry seriously. In 2017, for example, the Swiss label, the brand, the way you could put Swiss made on your watch got revised. And the new rule said that to qualify for Swiss made, a watch needed to only be 65% where its value was coming from Switzerland. And so what that means is that you could actually go get an entire, and I'm using air quotes, a Swiss movement built in China and then shipped over to Switzerland, and it could be assembled by a Swiss watchmaker, or you could have an entire movement that was Asian, moved and shipped over to Switzerland and then cased in Switzerland, and you could count that as part of the 65. And Moser, again, they looked at this and they're over 95% Swiss across their entire collection. They looked at this and said, this is a joke. This label is meaningless. Anyone can claim Swiss made on their watch. So what did these guys do? They made a watch out of cheese. Not joking. They made a one-off concept called the Swiss Mad Watch, AD. Get it? Mad as in not made. It's in a Swiss Mad watch instead of a Swiss made watch. It's a 42 millimeter case. It was made out of actual Swiss cheese. Specifically, it was a cheese. I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not French. I was in France for a little while playing soccer when I was in my teens, but I'm gonna do my best here. So do not get mad at me, okay? Vacheron Modor. Vacheron Modor? Vacheron Modor? I'll do my best. It was mixed with a composite resin so the cheese could be machined and polished, had a red fume dial, like the Swiss flag, see what they did there? A strap made out of Swiss cowhide. Unfortunately for a cow, it didn't make it. And the price tag, you're gonna love this, 1,081,291 Swiss francs. Why that exact number? Because 1291 is the year Switzerland was founded. See what they did there? The whole thing was glorious. It was brilliant, completely unhinged, and genuinely a middle finger to the entire Swiss watch industry. And to make sure the message landed, Moser announced they would stop putting Swiss made on their watches entirely, even though they qualified by miles, because the label had become meaningless to them. Now, here's where this gets really fun. Because they pulled Swiss made off the dial in 2017, that means that Moser watches before 2017, the ones from kind of the modern revival era, specifically the Endeavour lines, Endeavour, and the Venturer, Venturer line, the early Pioneer pieces, to me, still have those Swiss-made markers on the dial. And once you know this piece of history, that little Swiss-made inscription on the dial becomes this incredible inside joke. You're wearing a watch from a brand that ultimately said this label is meaningless by having this watch on your wrist that's from Moser that are typically less expensive, right? And it's almost like this protest. It's a horological artifact to me from the moment that Moser became Moser. And that brings me to the actual tip I want to give you from this brand. Again, I don't talk about speculation and all that kind of stuff, but the pre-market or the pre-owned market for late Moser Endeavours and Venturers, again, it's one of the great open secrets in this hobby, I think, right now. Again, talking about pieces from like the late 2000s to the mid 2010s, Endeavour center seconds, the Endeavour small seconds, the Endeavour perpetual calendars, the Venturer small seconds, the Venturer big date. These watches, brand new, today retail somewhere between $25,000 and well into six-figure territory, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, depending on the complication. On the pre-owned market, you can get one that says Swiss made on the bottom of it. You can find one in pristine condition. Examples of these late model Endeavours and Adventures in full-blown 18-karat white gold, for example, somewhere in the neighborhood of like a fifth of what Moser's going for right now, 1/5. Now we're still talking big money, right? We're still talking between like could be $7,000 to $15,000, right? We're talking about some of those watches in 18 karat white gold, in-house movements, fume dials, Swiss made on the dial, real hot horology for the price in this hobby that's honestly reasonable for what you're getting. Again, I get how ridiculous that statement is. Now, the Endeavour specifically has a monster power reserve. Depending on the variant that you get, some of the Endeavour movements can run for a full week or more, and that's wild. A normal mechanical watch typically will run for 40 hours to 72 hours or so, 70 hours. So a Moser Endeavour with the right caliber can go for 7 days without needing a wind. Now, the ones, when they say 7 days to guarantee their accuracy, but there are reports of these Endeavours, especially these ones that are, Swiss made on the dial, that go from 9 to 12 days. They just don't advertise that. But you could put your watch down, and almost 2 weeks later, your mechanical watch that you hand wound 12 days ago might still be running. Now, the accuracy is going to taper off, obviously, as the amplitude in those power reserves are going to kind of taper off as well. But again, to see your hand moving after 10 or 12 days is just, it's nuts. And again, you're going to get that in an 18 karat gold case, right? With the level of finishing that's nuts. And it's kind of, to me, it's still one of these great anomalies in the market. Now, the standard caveat is going to apply. You got to buy from trusted sources. You got to get service history. Service on a Moser is not cheap. Make sure that, boxes and papers and all that kind of stuff is there if you can find them. If you're getting white gold watches, for example, make sure that the pin buckle is also matching and it's white gold, because some people will take those and that's an extra $1,000 or so that they will go melt down, and you want your pin buckle. So if you've ever wanted to own a piece of genuine hot horology without paying these crazy hot horology prices, late model, pre-owned Moser, to me, is where it's at. I think it's one of the better plays in the market right now if you've wanted to own a Moser. Now, with that said, some people are going to be looking at these other Mosers that are brand new and shiny, and that's cool too. I don't know. Something about me likes the history and the old stuff, and I like the story behind it. And so again, that's who Moser is past, and I guess as we get into kind of the present. Now, they've also released watches that were taking shots at like the smartwatch industry, for example. They have a watch that literally looks like an Apple Watch. It looks like it's loading, but it's mechanical. Watches that have no markers at all. And they have, again, I told you that they have watches that look like an Apple Watch, again, mostly mechanical. And their CEO, Elon, goes on record criticizing the entire industry. And they're loud, and they are, they're the most submersive or subversive, unapologetic brand in hot horology. And they back it up with watches, again, to me, when you actually examine them, are genuinely among some of the best watches made today. So if you want a watch that says something like, I'm not playing the Submariner Seamaster game, the Moser says that pretty loudly. The Streamliner, the Pioneer, the Endeavour, the Venturer, all watches with attitude that have opinions, but do so with, I think, this really calm, kind of almost smirk to them. And I think that's kind of fun as well. So if you're interested, Moser's kind of a fun brand. Now, let's bring it all together. 3 brands, 3 completely different parts of the spectrum. Again, Yema, you can go online and you can find quartz variants of some of their watches for a couple $100. And they typically will ship them duties paid. So you'll get your French watch with a quartz movement typically for a couple $100, and then you can go all the way up their range and get an in-house micro-rotor diver or integrated bracelet watch for under $3,000 landed, right? $2,500 landed. Horage, we talked about, a Swiss technical in-house powerhouse, right? They're thin, they're comfortable, best rubber straps, I think some of them best in the business. On-the-fly bracelets are awesome as well, and I think the rest of the industry really is kind of implementing what Horage is kind of pushing. Now, Moser, I just talked about them. They're provocative, they're beautiful, they're loud. And right now, I think pre-owned market for them is kind of the best steal in hot horology. It won't be like that forever. It's similar to Parmigiani when the Tonda PF came out. The 40mm Tondas with the small seconds, those watches were going for $2,000 to $5,000. Now, I don't think you can find them for under $8,000, and I think it's going to continue to move up. Similar with the Parmigiani chronographs, right? The chronographs are crazy comfortable, and nobody was looking at them. And now all of a sudden, people are realizing, like, oh, this is an awesome watch. It's finished well. Some folks they kind of get turned off because it's not necessarily a completely in-house built movement, or they see it as the architecture has a module on top, and then other folks go, no, that's exactly what I want. I want a module on top that they can repair just some sections of it at a time, as opposed to disassembling the entire movement. So then all of a sudden, these Parmigiani movements that have modules become, the Metrograph, for example, becomes a killer, because people realize, oh, I can get a 40mm chronograph that's designed and built by Parmigiani, and they're way comfortable and they're beautiful, and no one talks about them. Awesome, right? When we get back to Moser, what do Yema, Horage, and Moser have in common? None of them are running where the ball is. They're all running to where the ball, I think, is going to be. They're not on the curated menu of boutiques that get put in front of you. They're not the 2-option comparison videos. They're not the answer to the Submariner or the Seamaster. And not coincidentally, when you wear one, the conversations you have are different. People who recognize Yema, Horage, Moser are people who know. They instantly skip past the small talk. You're already kind of in the deep end together, right? You know that this dude can swim and you're jumping in the pool already, right? You're not double checking to make sure that the water temperature is good or you know how that this person knows how to swim. That's the kind of conversations I think are worth having. So the hobby, again, is bigger than the cluster. It's way, way bigger. And once you see the cluster for what it is, once you see the decoy, the curated menu, the 2-option trap, you can't unsee it. You start to look around and notice that this incredible work is happening in spaces that nobody is looking at. And that's the whole game. That's why we do this. All right, so segment 9, let's close this thing out. So after the heaviness of episode 3, after all of this see through the matrix stuff that we've been doing today, I think we need something fun, pure, maybe a little unfiltered joy. So the next episode, we're going to be talking about 3 brands that I genuinely believe are making the most fun watches in the watch world right now. We're going to talk about Mr. Jones Watches, a London-based brand making watches that are essentially tiny pieces of conceptual art, watches that don't just tell time in the regular way, watches with skulls and Latin inscriptions and little ducks floating around in pools. They're going to be like nothing you've ever seen before. They're brilliant, they're joyful, they're genuinely original, and they're very affordable. Like under $300, under $400. We're going to talk about Studio Underdog, yes, with a 0 in the middle of dog. It's UND and then the number 0 and then G. You'll get used to it. It's another British watch micro brand. They have watercolor dials. They're basically taking a fun take on this whole thing. They have a watch that looks like a watermelon, a pizza, a cherry pie, avocados, guacamole, right? They have full color lume on some watches and it just looks like a kid drew it. And they sell out in seconds and minutes. And we're going to talk about why this is interesting. And then finally, we're going to close out next week with Zelos, a Singapore-based maker of some of the wildest material experiments in the micro brand land. Bronze cases, Damascus steel, forged carbon, meteorite, some of the wildest micro adjustment systems in the market for the price. Watches that you can get anywhere from $300 up to a couple thousand. And I think that they purposefully dare buyers not to buy their stuff. They are a little wild, and their prices, I think, are delightful. 3 brands, 3 completely different vibes, all of them proving what watches can be in the next episode. Okay, so that's episode 4 of What's on Your Restay. Quick favor, if any part of this episode resonated with you, share it. The decoy stuff, the soccer metaphor, the collector versus speculator distinction, if any of that landed, send this episode to one of your friends, make sure that they hear it, and this is how this is going to grow. One person at a time. If you've got a brand outside the cluster that you love and think more people should know about, message me. I want to hear about it. The whole point of this show is that we expand the conversation beyond past the same 3 to 5 watches, so help me do that. And until next week, I'm Wachowski. Take care of yourselves and wear something good.
Showroom case, you guard it like a